Let's get started. Sorry about interrupting the keynote. We need to keep the schedule. Welcome everyone. Welcome to Dreamforce. My name is Attila Wolf. I'm a Salesforce developer at Digital Genius. And I would love to show you today how you can supercharge your Lightning apps with base components. First of all, you've seen a few of these forward-looking statements. Please make all your purchasing decisions on products that are available today. All right, let's take a look at the agenda, what we're going to talk about today. First of all, I'm going to introduce you to Lightning components and give you a brief overview of what they are and how we are using them. Then we are going to talk about the various ways that you can create Lightning components and when you should use which ones. And last but not least, we are, of course, going to have a live demo. And I'm going to show you just how easy it is to work with base components. All right, so let's get started with the introduction to Lightning components. So I would like to share a story with you. When I was growing up, I loved playing with Legos. That was my favorite game of all time, building things out of my imagination with these small bricks that look like nothing, but when you build something, it's so great. As I grew up, I stopped playing with Legos. I was looking for a replacement that I can do as an adult. And when I first got my own apartment, I thought I had the solution, but turns out there's only so much IKEA furniture you can put into one apartment, so that didn't work out. Then Lightning components came out. I've been working on Salesforce for some time at that time, and when I saw Lightning components, I thought that to myself, that was it. These are these little components, these little building bricks that build up Lightning experience within Salesforce. They are reusable. They inspire creativity. You can build these components and you can build them into something huge. They work on both Salesforce Classic and Lightning Experience, which means it's really important that if you are creating a new project and creating a UI for your new app, it's worth considering to do in Lightning because it will work in Classic as well. Let's take a look at an example, just so you see what I'm talking about here. Looks like Legos, right? So this is an opportunity page. You've seen lots of these pages in Lightning Experience. I highlighted the Lightning components for you there. As you can see, everything is built of Lightning components in Lightning Experience. So the most interesting part is that some of these components they are built with smaller components, and that they build up into this whole Lightning experience. All right, so let's take a look at how we can build these. Now, we are talking about web development, right? So the first thought of somebody with experience on web UI development, I'll just build some HTML markup and build some CSS, right? I will make my app look like Lightning Experience so it fits in, and I'm going to do some custom CSS, which is great if you want to customize something on every single part of the screen, but it's not great if you want to create something standard. We need better tools to do that, right? This CSS here is just for creating one of those empty white boxes, what we call Lightning cards in Lightning Experience. It's about 100 lines for just styling one of those boxes. It's a lot of code, and I didn't even include the markup that you need to write to do that. So Salesforce realized this, of course, and gave us the next best tool, Salesforce Lightning Design System. The Lightning Design System, or SLDS, is basically an open source library of CSS classes, pre-built CSS classes for you. So when you are designing a Lightning component, you don't have to write the CSS yourself. All you have to do is write the markup. This is great, and it's evolving. Salesforce is adding more and more components to the Lightning Design System. It provides you with the tools to use standard UI elements on your Lightning apps. It's great, but it still doesn't produce the most readable code, and there's a lot of boilerplate code there. So if you want to create one of those boxes, those white boxes, those lightning cards that we talked about. It looks something like this. This is just an empty lightning card that you see a lot on Lightning Experience. And this is the code using SLDS to do it. It's a lot less code. You don't need to worry about the CSS, but still it's not very readable. And you need to do this for every single time you want to create one of those boxes, right? And this is not very much readable. So what we do then we go to base components, and this is the big one. So Salesforce realized that these SLDS components include a lot of boilerplate code. They could just build this into the Lightning component framework and then let us use the components out of the box. It's all based on SLDS, so everything you see when you use a base component is based on SLDS. It's being developed constantly. Salesforce adds more and more of these base components with every single release. So it's really great. I think this should be your first stop when you're building UI. They're really easy to use. They're really powerful. They include even some controller code that lets you integrate it with your apps more easily. And it evolves together with SLDS. The only downside to basic components is that it's not complete yet. So some of the components might not be available yet that you see in SLDS. They might not have a base component counterpart, or it may not be fully featured. But they're getting better with every single Salesforce release cycle. All right, let's take a look at that same Lightning card that we saw earlier. This is the same card, but with the base component code. And it's a bit less code, but what I really want you to look at is how readable that code is. It's just we're writing what we want to see. I want to see a Lightning card with a title. It's right there. I want to see a button, and I want to see some placeholder text in this example on the body. And that's exactly how the code reads. It's that simple, and there's tons of components that can do this. OK, so I've introduced you to base components. Let's see how we can actually use them. Let's build an app together. I brought a small challenge with me today. We are going to create a settings UI for an App Exchange app. It doesn't have to be an App Exchange app. It can be an app for your internal organization. Your admins or your customers will love you for creating a great settings UI for your app. In this case, the example app is an app for Service Cloud. And it's an app that connects to an external third-party system and sends some of the cases that arrive in Service Cloud to that third-party system, for example, for analysis. So what we are going to do is build a settings UI that lets us configure this app. We will need 3 settings in our basic version. We will need one setting to actually enable our trigger that sends the cases out. We will need a field that lets us specify the URL of that third-party outside system that we are sending to. And we will need, for example, a filter that can filter our cases to specify if we want to send all of the cases to that third-party system, or we want to just send the open ones, for example. All right, so let's build this UI with base components. Let's go ahead and jump into the demo. And for that, I'm going to switch to my IDE here. All right, so let's see if I can make this a bit bigger. OK. So this code you see here, this is most of this code is what you've seen before. This is that empty white Lightning card. I added 2 things here. The first one is an attribute called settings. This one right here is the custom setting record that contains the configuration we want to change on our UI within Salesforce. The second line here that I added here is just the handler method. This method runs when the component is first loaded, and it just reaches to the server and grabs those settings for us that allows us to change the settings. The rest is the same. We have the empty Lightning card, and I'm going to build this settings UI with those 3 configuration options that we talked about. So let's get started. I want to have this as a tabbed application so that I can expand the settings later on. So first component I'm going to use, this is called a Lightning tab set. And And within the tab set, I am going to add a lightning tab. I'm going to label this basic settings. This will be the content of this tab. And just to show you, I'm going to copy this and create a second tab. I'm going to call this advanced settings. Now, these three settings that we are creating today are going to go into basic settings, so I'm just going to put to do in the advanced ones. First thing here, I will add some margin to this using an SLDS class. So I'm going to add some horizontal margin to this. And then let's go ahead and build our inputs. So the Lightning input components, this is one of the most versatile base components out there. This can take the shape of any UI form element, basically. So first up, we are going to have our enabling option. So I'm going to call this enable case trigger. I want this to be a type of toggle, which is an on-off toggle UI element. And we need to take the value of this from somewhere. And that value will be, I'm just going to put this in a new line here. And that value will be from our setting attribute. Whoops. So I'm looking at the settings, enable case trigger custom field. All right, and since this is a toggle, this one also needs an attribute called checked to indicate if it should be checked by default. We are going to take that from the same setting value, simple as that. That's it. Oops, I don't need that one. That's all we need, and I'm going to add a new line here, just so it looks good. So for the second input, I'm just going to copy this whole thing, because we want a Lightning input, but this time we are going to call it API URL. Whoops, URL. And instead of a toggle, I would like to use a text type attribute. The value of this one is going to be the corresponding value in that custom setting. I'm calling this API URL, custom field. And this one doesn't need this checked attribute because this one is just a text. So that's it, basically. OK. Now, our third option is the filter based on the stage. So for that, I'm going to use a drop-down menu. That one is called a Lightning Select. I'm going to label this stage filter. And the value of this one will be taken again from our custom setting. Settings. The stage filter custom field. And we don't want to finish up with this one. This is a drop-down, so we are going to need some options here, which is simply called option. And the value of this one is going to be all, for all cases, if you want to send just all cases. And I'm going to copy this option 2 more times to create the other 2 options. I'm going to call this new, if we only want to send new cases in our trigger. And I'm going to call this open, if we want to send only the open cases in our trigger. All right, so that's it. Let's go ahead and save this. And let's see what this looks like. So this is our app as it was before the update. It's the empty Lightning card. Let's do a refresh. Let's hope the demo gods are with us. It sometimes takes 1 or 2 refreshes. Boom, there you have it. We have a settings UI with 2 tabs, basic and advanced settings. The advanced settings are in the to-do phase at the moment, but the basic settings, you'll notice they already have a value That's taken right from the server as the settings are now. We have a responsive toggle here. We have a text to enter our URL, and we have our filter for our stage filter. We can even use this button to save these settings. It's that simple. Trust me, your admins and your customers will love you if you create UI like this. All right, so let's jump back. Unfortunately, we cannot go into a more complex scenario, but hopefully this shows you how easy it is to build with these components. So I would like to leave you with a few next steps and a few options to choose from if you would like to know more. So Lightning base components and where to find them. First of all, the documentation for base components is one of the best developer documentations I've ever seen. It's an interactive website with all the base components right there interactively, so you can play around with those components right away within the documentation site, and there's lots of sample code in there as well. Trailhead, of course, has some great content on Lightning component development, so please go ahead and do a few badges on Trailhead. It will really help you get going with Lightning component development. Last but not least, the developer community is there for you. There's an awesome blog on the developer community website, and there's lots of great articles there about Lightning component development. And also, the forums, reach out to your fellow Trailblazers and ask them if they've encountered your problems or questions while developing. As for the contents of today's demo, I've created an unmanaged package for you to experiment with. The unmanaged package contains all of the code that I showed you today. It's the working Lightning components. Please feel free to install that package into any org, a developer org, or a Trailhead playground. You can see the code, read the code, you can change the code. You can use this as your first step to play around with base components, expand it maybe. I will share this presentation on the Dreamforce website under my session, so you will have that link to install the package within the presentation. All right, we have a few minutes left, so if you would like to ask some questions, I would be really happy to answer them for you. Yeah. Sorry?
Input tag cover lookups and Lightning input tag.
The Lightning endpoint? Sorry, could you speak up?
The Lightning input tag.
Yeah.
Does it cover lookups?
As in lookup fields in Salesforce. Yeah, so the question was, does the input Lightning component, the base component, cover lookup fields? Of course it does. That's the short answer. So when retrieving the data, that uses an Apex controller on the server side. So whatever you retrieve using the Apex controller, you can refer to that in Lightning, including in the input tag. So if you retrieve the data from Salesforce, you can display it using a base component. Great. Any additional questions? Yeah, go ahead.
So the old style, the UI, was it Aura UI input, stuff like that? Is that interchangeable? Like, can you have like Lightning run alongside of the Aura input tag?
Yes. So the question was, do the UI namespace tags still work together with the base components? The answer is yes. Although the UI namespace tags are a little outdated, so you're encouraged to use the base components instead. But if you have some UI tags in your components from previous releases, you can freely use them. They can coexist with the base components. You're free to put them on there in any of your apps.
Do they share attributes?
Do they share attributes? No, they don't. So they have a different structure. So you need to refer to the Lightning component library documentation for the base components. The UI elements are kind of the first version of Lightning components. So you need to. Some of them have the same attributes, yes, but they are not automatically interchangeable with that. Great. Yeah, good. I'm just gonna jump down here.